السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه من والاه. Welcome everyone to our event, inshallah, Rajab to Ramadan. Our intention today is to take advantage of the special time that we're in. And tomorrow, inshallah, there's a group from ICC making its way to Medina and Mecca to visit the holy city of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and to visit the Kaaba and to perform their Umrah because it is a special place. As we know, these are the best places in the Ummah. And so people, they seek it out. They travel and they seek it out. But there are also special times throughout the year, which we should also seek out. And that's why we're here today. The month of Rajab and what follows it in the month of Sha'ban and what follows in the month of Ramadan. Basically, from this month for the next 6 months, 7 months, every month has something special about it. Right? We're finishing up the month of Jumada al-Thani, which to my knowledge doesn't have any real significance in the Islamic calendar. Jumada al-Ula doesn't really either. Rabi' al-Thani doesn't really either. Safar. There's some months of the Islamic year where there's nothing that special about it from an Islamic perspective. But now we're entering into a string of months where there is actually something remarkable about each one. So just as people seek out Mecca and Medina and Masjid al-Aqsa, we should seek out the barakah and the blessing and the reward of Allah and His closeness in these months that are coming, inshallah. So that's why we're here, alhamdulillah. And we want to begin with some verses in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the sacred months. He talks about the months of the year and the sacred months. And what I'm going to talk about here is really important because Allah is going to talk about how the pre-Islamic Arabs and the disbelievers would treat the months of the year, and specifically what we call the sacred months, and how they made certain mistakes. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us this so that we don't make the same mistakes. So the verse is in Surah At-Tawbah, chapter 9. If any of you are taking notes and you want to look it up later, chapter 9, verses 36 to 37. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن عدة الشهور عند الله 12 شهرا في كتاب الله يوم خلق السماوات والأرض منها أربعة حرم. God decrees that there are 12 months ordained in God's book on the day when He created the heavens and the earth. 4 months of the 12 are sacred. This is the correct calculation. ذلك الدين القيم. There's more to the verse. But here the scholars, they say, why is Allah mentioning that there are 12 months in the year? Because to many of us, it seems obvious. There's 12 months in a year. And historically, you'll find this in other cultures where they had a 12-month calendar. So why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying it here? The scholars, they mention, some of them mention that the reason is that the Arabs used to sometimes add a month. Or some of them said they would add 5 days to a year. And the reason they would do this has to do with this idea of the sacred months. There are 4 sacred months. And in the sacred months, there was no fighting that was allowed. But sometimes the Arab tribes, the people in the Arabs, they would get a little bit impatient. And they would not want to wait until the month is over to fight. And so they would say, oh, this month is not, it's not a sacred month. Next month is a sacred month, right? And this one is just a normal month so that they could fight. Or they would say, when the month of Al-Muharram comes, they would say, it's not Muharram, it's just Safar 1, and then the next month is Safar 2. And then the year after, they would say there's 2 Muharrams. So what would they do? In 1 year, they might say there's 3 sacred months, and the next year, there's 5 sacred months. Why are they doing this? Why are they playing these games? Because of personal benefit that they would get for fighting, right? That their opponent, the people they're fighting, might be caught surprised, and they would have an advantage. And they would justify it in this way, either by adding a month or by switching up the months. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is trying to set the record straight. He's saying, no, there's 12 months, there's not 13, or there's not 12 months and 5 days additional. There's 12 months, and there are 4 that are sacred, this is the correct calculation. فَلَا تَظْلِمُوا فِيهِنَّ أَنفُسَكُمْ. Then Allah says, do not wrong yourselves, do not wrong your souls in these months. وَقَاتِلِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ كَافَّةً كَمَا يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ كَافَّةً وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Then Allah says, though you may fight the mushrikeen, the idolaters, at any time if they fight you first. So what does this mean? If you're in the sacred month of Rajab, which we're about to enter, if we have not entered it already, I haven't checked to see if they cited the moon or not. I haven't seen anything yet, but I think they might have cited it. Let me check. They cited. The regional one is not cited. So Rajab is probably going to be tomorrow. That's what it seems like. Allah. So imagine you would come to the month of Rajab and you're a Muslim and the disbelievers, they attack you. Allah's here saying you can fight them back because they're attacking you, you can defend yourself. So this is allowed. And remember that God is with those who are mindful of Him. And then Allah says, إِنَّمَا النَّسِيءُ زِيَادَةٌ فِي الْكُفْرِ يُضَلُّ بِهِ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يُحِلُّونَهُ عَامًا وَيُحَرِّمُونَهُ عَامًا ليواطئوا عدة ما حرم الله فيحلوا ما حرم الله زين لهم سوء أعمالهم والله لا يهدي القوم الكافرين. Allah says postponing the sacred months, like I mentioned before, saying that, oh, Rajab's not a sacred month, instead Sha'ban's a sacred month. Or Muharram's not sacred, but we're going to push it to the next month. Like playing with it like this, Allah is saying, is an act of disobedience by which those who disregard Allah are led astray. They will allow it 1 year, and they'll follow what Allah commanded 1 year, and they will forbid it in another year, in order to outwardly conform with the number of God's sacred months. But in doing so, they permit what God has forbidden. Their evil deeds are made alluring to them. God does not guide those who disregard Him. Okay, what's the point of all this? What's tonight in the minds of most people? Right, New Year's Eve. And a lot of Muslims right now in America and around the world have no idea that tonight might be Rajab or most likely tomorrow night. There's no awareness. There's a great awareness of the Gregorian calendar. Oh, it's New Year's. People say, oh, let's make New Year's resolutions and stuff like that. But a lack of awareness of our own calendar, despite the fact that we talked about, look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about it with emphasis here. A whole 2 verses talking about there's 12 months, there are 4 that are sacred. Don't wrong yourselves in the sacred months. There's something to observe in these sacred months, right? So we are here tonight. It's a unique opportunity. It almost never happens like this, where the new year, the Gregorian New Year, aligns with the beginning of a sacred month in Islam. So when you come here and you are saying that, oh, it's almost Rajab, and that's what's on your mind, instead of thinking New Year's, there's nothing wrong with necessarily New Year's in and of itself. But the fact that you're thinking about Rajab shows that what? Your worldview is Islamic. Your worldview is Islamic. Because what makes this month sacred? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deemed it sacred. But New Year's, who deemed New Year's sacred? Not God. Some secular Western people, right? Or someone, maybe some Christians back in the day. Someone said this is a special day. But it's not actually a special day in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the beginning of Rajab, this is a special month with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what should we do? When the sacred months come, we affirm this is the sacred month that Allah has established. Right? And we don't act as if it's not sacred. It is sacred. And it has certain rights over us. Okay? So Rajab is one of the sacred months. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us in a hadith explicitly that there are 4 sacred months, and he tells us which ones are sacred. Okay? Now let me do a test. Who can list off the 12 months in the Islamic calendar from 1 to 12? Who can do it? Who can give me number 1? Al-Muharram. Very good. Who can give me number 2? Safar. What's number 3? Rabi' al-Awwal, very good, which makes number 4. Rabi' al-Thani, number 5 is, it's the one that everyone forgets. Jumada al-Ula, and then Jumada al-Thani. What's number 7? Rajab. What's 8? Sha'ban. 9? Huh? Ramadan, the 9th month of the year, best month. Number 10, Shawwal. 11, anyone know? Dhul Qa'dah. Number 12, it's easy. Dhul Hijjah. We should memorize these, right? Because we could all say January, February, March, April, May, June, July, right? It's like, we should be like that with the months of the Islamic year. So we are in the 7th, we're coming into the 7th month, which is Rajab. And Allah says about it, don't wrong yourselves in these months. So which of the 12 are sacred? We know Rajab is sacred, but let's see what the Prophet ﷺ said. He said, إِنَّ الزَّمَانَ قَدْ اسْتَدَارَ كَهِيئَتِهِ يَوْمَ خَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ السَّنَةُ 12 شهرا منها 4 حرم 3 متواليات ذو القعدة وذو الحجة والمحرم ورجب مضر الذي بين جماد وشعبان. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said in his hadith al-Bukhari, time has come back to its original state, which it was when Allah created the heavens and the earth. So what's he saying here? The Prophet's indicating that people have gotten the calendar kind of off. They've been playing with it. And now what the Prophet is going to establish, okay, this month is Dhul Qa'dah, this month is Dhul Hijjah, right? We know for a fact what month it is, which ones are sacred, and from then on, the Muslims have continued upon that path. Whereas before that, there was some confusion because they were playing with the calendar. So he's saying, right now, we're reestablishing the way it was when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens and the earth. He says, 4 of them are sacred, 3 of those are in succession, back to back to back. What are those 3? Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, and Muharram. Month 11, 12, and number 1. They're back to back to back. And then you have one on its own, which is Rajab. And he here says it's called Rajab Mudar. The Rajab of Mudar. Mudar was a tribe amongst the Arabs, and they were known for revering and respecting the month of Rajab more than other Arab tribes. So the Prophet is just kind of distinguishing it, saying, Rajab, the one that the people of Mudar, they really respect, that Rajab. And he makes it even more clear. He says, Rajab, the one that's between Jumada and Sha'ban. Right? So these are the 4 sacred months. Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Al-Muharram, and Rajab. Notice Ramadan is not from the 4 sacred months, but we consider it to be the greatest month of the year. It is the greatest month. And there is a sacredness to it, but this idea of the sacred months that's mentioned in the Quran does not include Ramadan. Okay. What's the basic idea again of these months? These were months where you could not fight. It was haram to fight. This was the understanding. This later becomes abrogated, meaning later on, according to majority of the scholars, the Muslims were allowed to fight in these months. Later on, it became abrogated. But earlier on, it was not allowed. Okay? But there still is a sacredness that relates to it, which has to do with good deeds and bad deeds. So what do we know about the sacred months? Because none of us are going to go fight right now. At least I don't think so. What's important? Very basically, good deeds are magnified and multiplied in the sacred months. They're multiplied. The month of Rajab, when you do the same deed in Rajab, it will be multiplied more than it was in Jumad al-Thani or Jumad al-Ula. This is number 1. But secondarily, bad deeds will also be multiplied and magnified. So this is why he says, فَلَا تَظْلِمُوا فِيهِنَّ أَنفُسَكُمْ. Allah tells, he's warning us, don't oppress yourselves in these months. Right? Because just like when you go to Mecca, is committing a sin in Mecca the same as committing a sin in Phoenix? In Mecca, it's much worse. Right? When you commit a sin in Mecca and Medina, it's actually more punishment than if you commit it outside of the Haramain. This is well known. And as well, when you do a good deed in Mecca and Medina, the reward is much higher. So this is a time for us to treat it, honestly, the way I like to look at it, the way that you think about Ramadan. Rajab is not Ramadan. But the energy you bring to Ramadan, try to bring some of that energy to the month of Rajab. It's not the same. Ramadan is special. But it should have this idea that if I commit a sin here, it's actually quite weighty. Okay, it's actually quite weighty. And Qatada, one of the scholars, he said, العمل الصالح أعظم أجرا في الأشهر الحرم. Good deeds are rewarded more in the sacred months. والظلم فيهن أعظم من الظلم فيما سواهن. And oppression in these months is greater than in other months. Okay? And he says, وإن كان الظلم على كل حال عظيمة. He says, even though oppression in any month is terrible, oppression in any month is terrible, but to oppress yourself or others in these months is especially bad. Right? It's especially bad. So we're being informed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and by the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is a time to what? To be more aware, to buckle up, right? To turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't treat it just like any other day. Now next, what I want to talk about is the mentality of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, in their life, what was the most important month of the year? In the most important month of the year of every Muslim is what? Ramadan. So the Ramadan was like the center of their life, right? And they used to think of everything in relation to Ramadan, right? So when they would finish the month of Ramadan, for the next 6 months, what would they do? Who knows? You might have heard this before. When Ramadan is finished, what do they do for the next 6 months? Yeah. Very good. They would make dua to Allah to accept the Ramadan. And this is something that we don't do very often. We do a deed and we're like, yeah, he'll accept it. Yeah, he might. But we should ask Allah to accept our good deeds, especially something as great as Ramadan. You know, Umar al-Khattab, he mentioned that if I knew that Allah had accepted one deed, if I had a guarantee He had accepted one of my good deeds, then I would feel extremely hopeful in the next life. Just one deed, you know. And one of the scholars, Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, after he passed away, one of his students mentioned that he came to his student in a dream. And the student asked Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, who was one of the greatest scholars of Islam, one of the greatest spiritual scholars of our ummah. And he asked him, مَا فَعَلَ اللَّهُ بِكَ? What did Allah do with you? And he said, Allah forgave me because of a few rak'ahs that I prayed in the middle of the night. And he said, all of the words that I spoke, all of the fancy phrases that I used in teaching about Islam were nothing. Right? It was some rak'ahs he prayed in the middle of the night. That's the reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave him. So you don't know which deed Allah will accept and will be the basis of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgiving you and entering you into Jannah. Okay? So they would do this 6 months, Ya Allah, accept my Ramadan, Ya Allah, accept my Ramadan, Ya Allah, accept my Ramadan. After 6 months had passed, what did they start doing? They switch. Now what are they asking for? Ya Allah, Allahumma ballighna Ramadan, Allahumma ballighna Ramadan, Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. Ya Allah, make us reach Ramadan, make us reach Ramadan, make us reach Ramadan. Look at how much anticipation they had, how much excitement and energy they had. And because they were always making this dua and they were always thinking about it, when they reached the month of Ramadan, they felt as we all should feel. Look at the gift Allah gave me. I've been asking for this for months and He gave me Ramadan. And so they don't let the opportunity slip. Right? But I know myself, maybe some of you are, you guys are, I'm sure, better than me on this. I know many times in my life where it's like 5 days before Ramadan and I'm just like, it's not even in my mind. The day before, I'm like, oh, let me make a plan. Right? Oh, I'm going to read this much Quran, right? And you should put too high of a goal. And then I burn out within 5 days. Because what? My mind and my heart were not thinking about Ramadan. They was not preparing for Ramadan. But right now, we have that amazing opportunity. We should have been doing it for the last 4 months, saying, Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. But now, in these months, we know that it's a very special time to make that dua. So one of the hadiths that is not, that's a hadith that the scholars mention about the month of Rajab. And a lot of the hadiths about the month of Rajab, by the way, are fabricated. So be careful on your WhatsApp groups, what you see. Many of them are weak, and we'll talk about weak hadith in a second, about whether weak hadith can be used, and what is a weak hadith. But this hadith is mentioned by the scholars and is generally accepted. that كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا دخل رجب قال كان يقول اللهم بارك لنا في رجب وشعبان وبلغنا رمضان. When the month of Rajab would enter, the Prophet ﷺ would say, Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab wa Sha'ban. Oh Allah, bless us in the month of Rajab and the month of Sha'ban, wa ballighna Ramadan, and make us to reach the month of Ramadan. Okay. It's a hadith mentioned by Imam Ahmad and Tabarani and Bayhaqi. And there's some weakness in the chain. Okay. But the scholars, they say it's okay as long as it's not too weak to act upon this, because it's a good thing to do. Dua, asking Allah to bless you in this month and the next month to make you reach Ramadan is okay. So weak hadiths, so something we should all learn. The scholars say weak hadiths are okay to act upon as long as what it's telling you to do, you already know is good. So for example, anyone know there's a weak hadith about reciting a certain surah after Fajr every day? Anyone know what that surah is? Surah Yasin. Okay, it's a weak hadith. But weak is not fabricated. Fabricated means the Prophet didn't say, it's lied. It's a complete lie. Weak means there's a weakness in the chain, but there's still a chance that the Prophet ﷺ did say it. Okay? Meaning it's not a straight up lie. Okay? It's just there's maybe one of the narrators is weak in some way. So they say in something like this, what is it telling you to do? Recite Surah Yasin. Okay, what's the ruling of reciting Surah Yasin? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Reciting Quran, any surah, whatever, is good. So is it okay for me to apply this in my life? Sure. And that's why you find across the Muslim world, what's one of the most common practices after Fajr? People are reciting Surah Yasin. As long as you don't believe that it's a sunnah. You can't believe that it's a established sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But it's good, you can do it and you can say, I feel like I'm gonna be rewarded for this. It's a good practice. So similarly with this dua. Okay, so we need to be careful. A lot of us, we haven't studied hadith sciences and we think weak just means like, oh, it means nothing. That's not how the scholars have discussed it, right? So this hadith, we can apply it, and many of the scholars, they apply this. Let's all say it together so that we can repeat it, inshallah. Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab wa Sha'ban wa ballighna Ramadan. Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab wa Sha'ban wa ballighna Ramadan. Last time. Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab wa Sha'ban wa ballighna Ramadan. Okay, good. Who thinks they memorized it already? Inshallah. You can find it online. It's not hard to find, inshallah. We'll try to post it on our Instagram, inshallah. So this is good to say, inshallah. And it seems like tonight is not the first night of Rajab, it'll be tomorrow night. Does it seem like there were any sightings? For those who follow moon sightings. I don't know what the calculation says. I think according to the calculation, it's also tomorrow. Okay. So what have we said so far? There's 12 months in the year, 4 sacred ones. Rajab is one of them. In that month, good deeds are more encouraged, bad deeds are more discouraged, more to be avoided, more serious in the way that we're approaching. And why are we doing this? Because part of it is that we're preparing for the month of Ramadan as well. Okay, the more we put into these months, the more we will find in the month of Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala. And there's a famous quote from Al-Imam Abu Bakr al-Warraq al-Balkhi. And I love this because it gives you an image of how to think of the next 2 months before Ramadan. He says, Shahru Rajab, Shahru Zar. The month of Rajab is the month of planting the seed. Wa Shahru Sha'ban, Shahru Saqi lil-Zara. The month of Sha'ban is the month in which you water the seed. Water the seed. Okay? Wa Shahru Ramadan, Shahru Hasad al-Zara. The month of Ramadan is the month where you harvest, right? And reap the rewards of the seed. Okay. So what do most people do? May Allah not make us of them, and may Allah guide all of us to be better this year. But most people, what they do is, again, right before Ramadan, maybe a week before Ramadan, they start thinking about Ramadan. Maybe a couple, maybe 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. Ask yourself, what can my Ramadan be if I invest in the next 60 days? And start making those steps, those small steps towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Planting the seed, watering the seed in the next 60 months. How much more beautiful will my Ramadan be? And a lot of us have never experienced it, right? Like as I'm mentioning that, like I've never done that before. I never spent 60 days before Ramadan actively, consciously preparing for the month of Ramadan, right? So this is an opportunity. It's an amazing opportunity for us to start already walking towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the Allah that we worship in Ramadan is the same Allah that we worship right now. Allah does not change. Allah is Allah, and we can always walk towards Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we can change. And I want to be better on the 29th or the 30th of Sha'ban than I am right now. That's one of my goals. May Allah allow us to reach that time. Say Ameen, inshallah. Okay, so now there is something to mention about the first night of Rajab. Now, a lot of things I mentioned earlier, a lot of things that you might find online about Rajab are fabricated. So there are many hadith that are fabricated, that are just lies. And other hadith that are weak. But there is one practice, there's one narration, but it's not from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, it's from the early generation of Muslims, of how they used to view this day. So there's in Imam Shafi'i's book, he has a famous book called It's one of his fiqh texts. He mentions, بَلَغَنَا أَنَّهُ كَانَ يُقَالُ. He says, it has reached us, meaning it's reached Imam Shafi'i, that it used to be said, إِنَّ الدُّعَاءَ يُسْتَجَابُ فِي خَمْسِ لَيَالٍ. That dua, he said it reached us, that dua is guaranteed acceptance on 5 nights. Okay? Who's saying this? Imam Shafi'i. He's not saying it's a hadith, by the way. He's just saying it's reached us from the scholars, from the ranks of the awliya and the people who are practicing the deen, that this idea is there. There's 5 nights where dua is guaranteed acceptance. في ليلة الجمعة, the night of Jum'ah. Right? So what's today? Yeah. So like Thursday night going into Friday. Once it hits Maghrib, that night is a special night to make dua. وَلَيْلَةِ الْأُضْحَى, the night of Eid al-Adha. Sorry, al-Adha. The night of Eid al-Adha. If you wake up, you make dua, right? Then this is going to be guaranteed acceptance. وَلَيْلَةُ الْفِطْرِ, the night of Eid al-Fitr. So the 2 Eids. So what did he say so far? Jum'ah, the night of Jum'ah, and the night of the 2 Eids. These are nights where the early generations used to wake up and used to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, وَأَوَّلُ لَيْلَةٍ مِنْ Rajab, and the first night of Rajab. Right? وَلَيْلَةُ النَّصْفِ مِنْ Sha'ban, and the 15th night of the month of Sha'ban. So these next 2 months have 2 days that the early Muslims used to focus on waking up and making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The 1st of Rajab and the 15th of Sha'ban. Okay? The other 3 are going to, Jum'ah is every week, so that's good. And then you have the 2 Eids. So yeah, so again, there's different ways of determining the months, right? So there's calculations and there's moon sighting. And in moon sighting, there's different types. So I generally follow regional moon sighting, which means if anyone sights the moon in the Western Hemisphere, so North America, South America, then they consider it to be the next month. And according to that one, they didn't sight it today, so it will be tomorrow. It's not a bad idea to wake up tonight too, just to cover your bases. Again, what are we saying? Fajr comes in at 6-ish. Wake up 15 minutes before, right? Make dua. That's why I'm going to try to keep this short so we can go home and get sleep, right? Wake up a little bit before and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is already something that we know is good, but here we find something from the Salaf. Again, I'm not saying it's a hadith, but something where the early generations, they used to practice, meaning there's probably something. They're probably not getting it from nowhere, right? There's something going on here, right? Where this night is special. And Imam Shafi also mentions وعن ابن عمر رضي الله عنه قال خمس ليال لا يرد فيهن الدعاء. There are 5 nights that dua is not rejected. ليلة الجمعة, the night of الجمعة, وأول ليلة من رجب, وليلة النصف من شعبان, وليلة العيد, وليلة النحر. It's the same thing basically, that these 5 days that I mentioned, dua will not be rejected, meaning it will be accepted. So we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala arouse us from our sleep. And it's very easy nowadays to do it. As in the winter, it's like this is a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oftentimes this falls in the middle of the summer. It's difficult to do. It's easy this time, right? So we shouldn't miss it. Right? We should all do our best to wake up and to wake up our children, right? Wake them up and wake up our spouses and say, just wake up and make dua. What is it that you want, right? Just for 10, 15 minutes. I'm not saying stay up the whole night. If you want to, great. If you can, great. But at least something, right? At least something. It's like, you wouldn't even allow your kids to miss a meal, right? So for the physical, we'll be very, very, adamant about it. But then with the spiritual, like, oh, I don't want them to think that like the deen is hard. It's 5:45, they can wake up. It's okay. Tell them to go back to sleep after. Wake up, they pray Fajr, go back to sleep. But it's dua. You want something good for your kid, So this is something that is mentioned. Again, is it a hadith? I didn't say it's a hadith. Right? It's not a hadith. Rather, it's something that we find the likes of Imam Shafi'i. Imam Shafi'i is not like a random person. Imam Shafi'i is one of the greatest imams of the Salaf. So if he's encouraging something like this or transmitting something like this, right, then it's not like it has no basis. There's some basis. And this is many of the scholars, they apply this. Okay? They apply it. Moreover, do we consider it a sunnah? Say on the first of Rajab, do we consider it sunnah to wake up and make dua? No. Why? Because in order to consider it to be an established sunnah, you need to have a stronger evidence. You need to have like a authentic hadith or reports from the companions that say like this is established from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, something stronger. So we wouldn't say it's a sunnah. Sunnah is a high thing. We would say maybe it's recommended. It's recommended, right? So recommended is mustahab, called mustahab, and then you have sunnah mu'akkada, the emphasized sunnah. What's an example of that? The 2 rak'ahs of sunnah before Fajr are highly emphasized. So if you have a person, I just want to give an example, just so you guys, we have to start learning these things because deen is ilm, it's knowledge. If you wake up and you make dua like all night, right? And then you fall asleep and you wake up with like 3 minutes left to pray Fajr, right? And you didn't pray the sunnahs and you just prayed the fard to get it in. Then that night was worse than the previous night. Because the previous night, at least you got sunnah and that's better. So what did you do? You traded something lower for something higher. So why do we have to learn these different things? That there's certain things that are obligatory, certain things that are sunnah, certain things that are just recommended, so that we know the priorities. If something's obligatory, I don't trade it for anything. And if something is sunnah, I don't trade it for something recommended. Rather, I focus on the obligations, then I focus on the sunnahs, and then I can start doing these as well. So that's why we have to be aware of these types of things. It would be a bid'ah to consider a sunnah. It's not a sunnah. Okay. Any questions on that before we move on to the next point? Yeah.
Islamically, we start the night. So like
Mhm.
before. After Maghrib on
Maghrib.
Thursday,
Yeah.
would be Jummah's night, correct?
So Maghrib is the night. So we're night. We're nighttime now.
So right now.
So from 5:25 until Fajr comes in. That's night. So you could just make dua. We're gonna make dua inshallah to end this gathering as well. You can make dua before you go to sleep. But it's especially good to make dua in the last third of the night. We know that in general. So that would be a good time to do it. But if you're like, you get home and it's 1 a.m. and you're worried you're not going to wake up, then just make dua or just make dua before you go to sleep. Make dua before you go to sleep and inshallah you wake up as well. One of the things that we found from our teachers, we asked our teachers, how can we wake up for tahajjud? It's really hard. Right? And they said, it's really, really easy. It's so easy. They said, ask Allah to wake you up. And it always works. Right? It always works. Like, Ya Allah, please, Ya Allah, wake me up. You always wake up. So make that dua as well. Make that part of your dua. Okay. The next thing that's mentioned, and again, this is a weak hadith, but according to some scholars, it's not super weak. Okay. To increase in seeking forgiveness. وعن علي رضي الله عنه مرفوعا, it's on from Ali ibn Abi Talib, may Allah be pleased with him. He said that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, أكثروا من الاستغفار في شهر رجب فإن لله في كل ساعة منه عتقاء من النار. رواه الديلمي. That it says that Ali said that the Prophet ﷺ said, increase and be abundant and asking Allah to forgive you, saying astaghfirullah. Okay, which we know is already a good thing to do, right? In the month of Rajab, because in every hour of the month of Rajab, there are those who are freed from the hellfire. Okay. Now, is this for sure true? What do the scholars say about weak hadith? Like, we don't know. Is that actually true? We don't know. We hope for it. We hope for it. But what is it telling you to do? Something you already know is good. Istighfar. So you find many of the scholars, what do they tell you? Their general advice in this month is to do a lot of astaghfirullah. And the minimum of what we should do is 3 astaghfirullahs after every salah, right? And that could be something that if we're not doing it now, that could be the extent of what you start doing. Because 3 after every salah is not a little amount. Right? Say you were doing 0 istighfar. You do 3 after every salah, that's 450 in the next month. That's a lot. That's not a small amount, right? Now, the number that's mentioned by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is that he used to do it 100 times in a day. Anyone know how long it takes to say astaghfirullah 100 times? Anyone have an idea? Yeah. So if you wanted to do 100 times astaghfirullah, it's not hard. It's not hard. So that could be something that someone brings into their life. And at the end, we're going to talk about how to start building habits in these months. Because what you don't want to do is after this talk go, wow, I'm just, yeah, and create set a list of 17 habits, right, to do. And you're going to start tomorrow and you're like, you're going to burn out within 2 days. And when the 30th of Shaban comes along, you're going to be like, man, I think I'm worse. I think I went backwards, right? So everything has to be bitadarruj, gradually, right? You grow gradually. Okay, so think about each of these things we're mentioning, and you want to think, okay, what's one step I can start making in that direction that's reasonable for me to make? Okay, but this is something that's good to do, is to increase in and seeking forgiveness. Now, there are other ideas that I want to mention so that we teach each other, inshallah ta'ala. And I'm not someone who's quick to say bid'ah, okay? And our scholars are not quick to say bid'ah. We have to be careful about certain things. So there are certain things that you might hear that are actually not true about Rajab, or not conclusively established. There are some people that might say, oh, this specific day in Rajab, they'll say one of the days of Rajab, if you fast it, it's like a really big deal. And it's like sunnah and stuff. It's like, no. There's no specific day of Rajab. There's no specific day of Rajab where there is a authentic or even good or strong hadith that says that there's like a special day. But what do we know is true? Fasting more in this month is good. Fast more. That's good. And if you're going to fast, then try to fast the days that the Prophet told you are generally good to fast. The 3 white days, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, or Mondays and Thursdays, right? These are good things to fast, right? 13th, 14th, and 15th, right? These are 3 days that the Prophet ﷺ would consistently fast every single month. Right?
Since together?
Back to back to back. Yeah, but you break your fast in between. Yeah. So 13th, 14th, and 15th. So this is really good. If you do that, it's as if you fasted the whole month, right? So that would be good. But anything that you hear about, oh, this specific day fasting is going to give you all these special rewards, you can fast, but those rewards are not established, and there's no specific merit to those days. Same thing with Qiyamul Layl. Wake up on this night, this special night, and do Qiyam. There are a hadith about other months where there's special days to wake up and do Qiyamul Layl. In Rajab, there's nothing that's authentic. Okay? But if you want to do Qiyamul Layl, it's good. Do it. Right? I'm not telling you not to, but we're just saying this idea there's a specific day in the Rajab to do it. There is. Lastly, there is this idea that the 27th night of Rajab is the night when the Prophet went on his night journey, right? From Mecca to Jerusalem, and then from Jerusalem to through the heavens, and then went to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you will find some ulama saying this and teaching this. However, all the ahadith about this are extremely weak, if not fabricated. Maybe those scholars, they might disagree. They might say it's not fabricated, it's just weak. And because it's weak, they'll just say it's an opportunity for us to teach the story again. That's fine. But just it's not like this idea that the 27th night is like a night to like wake up and fast and do qiyamul layl and stuff like that. It's not, right? If you want to believe it's the 27th night, knock yourself out. Knock yourself out. But there's no strong evidence for it. There's 6 different opinions on when when the Prophet ﷺ went on the night journey, and none of them have conclusive evidence for them. Right? Nevertheless, I believe that one of the reasons why you do find many scholars talking about this story is because of the value that it imparts about salah. Salah, our prayer. And prayer is one of the things that we are going to focus on in these next 2 months. All of us should do a diagnosis, right? And look at our salah. How is our salah doing? Where can we improve? What is the next step I can take to improve my salah? Right, so I think this is why some of the scholars, they take this opportunity to kind of talk about it. But again, it's nothing that's established in the sunnah. Okay, so what does that mean? This is a month to increase in good deeds, to avoid bad deeds, but there's no specific day where there's some amazing thing. Besides what we mentioned about the first night of Rajab, it's a good night to make dua. It's the only thing that we have. And even that's not a hadith, that's going back to what the early generation did. Okay? Does that make sense, everyone? I know I'm saying a lot of things. I want to make sure these things are clear, inshallah.
More of a logical reasoning for the benefits of doing more than usual with these. Rather than giving the month power. Or not just
like it is special though. Did you want to finish?
That's all.
No, you're good. So it's a month that we want to increase because it's a sacred month. That's why. And all the sacred months are months to do extra good deeds. Right? So jazakallah khair. It's very good. But there's nothing else beyond that. Okay. Tamam. So now I just want to we'll finish off now and then we can open it for Q&A. My recommendation for myself and for everyone here is to choose 2 to 3 good habits that you want to start working on. And ideally, you want to choose these to be somewhat connected to Ramadan. So, okay, in Ramadan, maybe I want to, for example, read 10 pages of Quran a day. So that's like what I hope for in Ramadan. And right now I'm reading 2.5 pages. Okay? Okay, so what are the steps I can take in this month and next month to build that gradually? So maybe you say, okay, I have 60 days. I'm going to split it into 3 20-day chunks. The first 20 days, I'm going to go from 2.5, right, to maybe 4 or 5, whatever. And I'm just going to work on that, 5 pages a day. I'm going to increase it, but I'm not going to go all the way to 10 right now. I'm going to go to 5. And I build that. And the next 20 days, if I'm solid with that, maybe you give yourself a number. If I'm 80% successful, I'll move on to the next thing. 7.5 pages, right, for the next 20. And then after that, maybe you move to 10. Start thinking like this, right? Start thinking in stages. The reason that we don't maintain our Ramadan routines is because we go from 0 to 60, and it's really hard to maintain that after. But the way we need to change our mindset is that I want whatever I do in the Ramadan to become my normal habit, right? So if my goal in Ramadan is to read 10 pages, I'm going to read 10 pages. I'm never going to stop reading 10 pages. My teacher, he calls us Ramadan Forever. He has a program called Ramadan Forever. You can find it online actually on YouTube. And it's all about these small habits and building gradually. So my recommendation is that there are four categories you should be looking at working on in terms of good habits. And you can just choose what you want to do, right? One is prayer, looking at your prayer. Okay. Number two, habits related to Quran. Number three, habits related to dhikr, just general dhikr, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number four, fasting. Okay. These are four buckets of good deeds that we can start to work on now as we move towards the month of Sha'ban and the month of Ramadan. And I really recommend that you only choose 2 to 3 things to work on at a time. 2 to 3 things. And make them things that are reasonable for you to do. Don't make it something that's so hard to do. Just start taking that first step towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you could literally just be doing really something, just for the first 20 days, go easy on yourself, make it really easy. But it's still an increase from where you're at right now. And move from there. Okay. And then I recommend on the flip side, we should all identify one bad habit / sin, right, that we want to work on. And try to figure out how can I minimize this sin. And create some type of a plan or barriers, like, okay, I only backbite, for example, say it's backbiting, I only backbite around when I'm in certain environments. So I'm gonna just avoid those environments more. Or whenever the backbiting starts, I'm gonna remove myself immediately, whatever it is. You come up with a plan. How are you going to start tracking it? Just one sin that you're gonna start tracking and keeping yourself accountable and being reflective about it. Okay. If we're like this, by the way, month to month to month, each month, just considering 1 to 2 to 3 good habits, and one thing that we're working on, the growth is amazing. But what does shaitan do? He makes you impatient. That's not enough. You're not doing anything. Increase it. Allah deserves more, right? Do more, do more, do more. You're just a little weakling. Look what these guys are doing. You're strong. You can do it like them. Because he knows that this is how I'm going to get them. I'm going to burn them out. I'm going to get them off balance. And when they fall, they're going to fall hard. All right? And then I got him where I want him. He's really smart. But he's also a punk. And we hate him. We shouldn't say anything nice about him. Okay? So inshallah, this is the basic recommendation, inshallah. And one thing that I've been using lately that I really love and I want to share with everyone, it's an app called Atoms, ATOMS. Has anyone read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear? Okay. Yeah, it's a really good book. And he made an app called Atoms. And there's like a free trial for it. And my free trial just ended today, actually. And then there's like a paid version. And I loved it so much that I paid for it. It's like, and I paid for the yearly, like because it was cheaper. But it was like 50 something bucks. I was like, it's worth it. Because I was benefiting so much from the app. It's a really simple app. You can also just use your notes app. I use that too. It's called Atoms, ATOMS, Atoms. And he only lets you work on a maximum of 6 habits. But again, I recommend just limit it to 3. 3 things that you're working on. Maybe 4, if you want to do the 4 categories we mentioned. Prayer, fasting, Quran, dhikr. And if you have questions about, okay, like what should I start doing in each of those categories, feel free to ask and we can talk about those things. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. Again, it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can be a small thing, but you're consistent with it. The most beloved actions to Allah are the most consistent, even if they're small. Wallahi. It doesn't have to be a big, I'm not telling you that tomorrow night you're changing your life and you're never going to go like if in one fell swoop. It's going to happen gradually. Okay, so that's basically what I have for all of us, inshallah. So just as a recap, Rajab is a sacred month. Do not oppress yourselves. We should not oppress ourselves in them. We should increase in our good deeds and we should decrease in our bad deeds. We should be asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in Rajab, to bless us in Sha'ban, and to enter us into the month of Ramadan. We should view these next 2 months as months of preparation. We're planting the seed in Rajab, watering the seed in Sha'ban, and we are going to harvest in Ramadan. The first night of Rajab is a night where we should make dua. We can make dua before we go to sleep, or we can also wake up in the last third of the night and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is good to increase in istighfar, asking Allah to forgive us. And there's no special day to fast or to do qiyam in the month of Rajab, but it's generally good to increase in all good actions. And my last recommendation was to choose 2 to 3 good habits to work on in the month of Rajab and in the month of Sha'ban as you move towards your goal in Ramadan, or the thing you want to work on in Ramadan, and that you can use this app called the Adams app. Inshallah ta'ala. So now we can have, what time is it? It's 8:13. So we can have Q&A, inshallah. I hope this was a benefit to all of you. And again, it's also not about, so if I can say one last thing before we do Q&A, it's not just about actions and improving in actions, but also about our hearts and how our hearts are oriented towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as we're doing these ibadahs, these good actions, we should be asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us sincere in the action, make us feel the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make us experience His mercy and His forgiveness. So it's meant not just to, rack up the good deeds, but to become a different type of person. And James Clear actually makes this point. For those of you who have read the book, he says good habits that stick, they have 2 things that go with them. Number 1, they're attached to a particular time. So you say, I'm going to do, I like using the example of push-ups. I'm going to do 10 push-ups after every prayer. So you're attaching it to something that's at a specific time. Like I'm going to pray, I'm going to do 10 push-ups. So number 1 is that you attach it to a particular time, either like 12 p.m. or like something connected to like Salah, for example. And the second thing that makes you stick with the habit is that you connect it to the kind of person you're trying to become. So when you do it, you remind yourself, why am I doing it? So I'm praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so I can become one of the muqarrabeen, one of those who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or of the muttaqeen, the people who are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you connect it to the virtue that you're seeking, right? The virtue that you want, right? That you connect it to the habit. Why are you doing push-ups? To become a strong person. Why are you reading a book? To become an intelligent person. Why are you praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? To become a person of taqwa, right? So these are 2 things to be aware of. And if you use the Adams app, he actually makes you do that. He makes you put the habit, then he tells you it says what time you're going to do it, and it says why you're doing it. And it's a good reminder, right, as to why you're doing all of these things. All right, so we can have Q&A now, inshallah ta'ala. Anything that was correct is from Allah, anything that is wrong is from myself. Yeah. Very good question. No, it's in every month. Every month it's recommended to fast 13, 14, and 15. Yeah. Except in Ramadan, where it's not recommended, it's obligatory, right? But yeah. Yes, it's established from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah.
I had a question.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like in the context of this, but I heard like it's better to seek knowledge than to pray sunnah. I heard that before. I don't know if I'm getting it wrong. But to seek Islamic knowledge than to pray 2 sunnahs that after Isha, after Maghrib. I don't know if that's true or not. I just heard it from somewhere. I just want to know if it's true or if you know.
Yeah. No, that's good. So he said that he heard someone say that it's better to seek knowledge than to pray sunnah prayers. It depends on the kind of knowledge. So if it's knowledge that is obligatory upon you, right? So for example, the knowledge of how to pay my zakat. If I had a choice, and you can do both, but if I had a choice, someone's like, you can only pray 2 rak'ahs of sunnah right now, or you can learn your zakat. The sheikh who's going to teach you zakat is leaving in 2 minutes, and you have 2 minutes to learn from him. Like, this is a very weird situation, but let's say that's the situation. What would you do? Yeah, you would have to go in, because that's an obligation. Because it's an obligatory knowledge, it's more important than a sunnah prayer. But almost never are you going to have to choose between the 2. Right? And so the scholars, they say, my teacher specifically was going over this with us, because there are some students that go around and they say, oh yeah, the scholars, something similar. The scholars, they say that, or many people, they say, study. You don't have to practice all the sunnahs. Like, meaning you wake up in the middle of the night, right? And you're just studying. and you don't pray any tahajjud. There are some people that were arguing that this is okay. And our teacher went through and showed us so many texts of the ulama saying the exact opposite. You have to wake up in the middle of the night and you know that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to pray. You should pray at least something. Maybe you don't do the full 8, but at least do 2 rakats, something, right? So it should never be an excuse that, oh, I'm studying knowledge, so therefore I'm not going to do the sunnah. No, you're studying knowledge, so you should do the sunnah. That's the very reason that you should do it. So I would say it's not correct. That generally speaking, I would say it's an incorrect idea. But in a hypothetical scenario, like I gave you with the zakat, if it's between learning my fards, yeah, then sure. But that almost never happens. You can learn the zakat and you can pray your sunnah. So the sunnah, things that are emphasized sunnahs are very serious. Like they're not a small thing. And the different madhabs, they talk about the consequences of leaving a sunnah is different in each madhab. I'll just give the Shafi'i school and the Hanafi school. The Shafi'is, they say, if you leave a sunnah all the time, then you're never sinful. You're not sinful, okay? Because it's sunnah, it's not obligatory. So the Shafi'is are more lenient. What do the Hanafis say? I'm Hanafi, right? I love all the madhabs, but what do the Hanafis say? The Hanafis say, if you leave a sunnah one time, there's no sin. You're not going to be punished for it. But if you never do it, ever, like you come to the masjid and it's like Jum'ah and you have 10 minutes to pray and you know there's a sunnah and you're just sitting there. And even in that circumstance, you're like, nah, I'm not going to do it. They're like, if you never do it, they say you're sinful for that. Because now at that point, you've turned away completely from the sunnah of the Prophet. So everyone's going to be Shafi'i now, right?
Yeah.
That's too strict, right? But what are the Hanafis saying? They're saying, even if you don't always do the sunnah, even if it's not part of your normal, when you have the opportunity to do a sunnah, do it. Don't leave it completely. مَا لَا يُدْرَكُ كُلُّهُ لَا يُتْرَكُ كُلُّهُ. The scholars say, whatever you can't do completely, don't leave it completely. Whatever you can't do completely, don't leave it completely. A funny story about this, by the way. I have a sister who's Hanafi from Pakistan, and she was at the mall with her family, and the time for Dhuhr was going out, and so she had wudu and she just took like a prayer rug and she put her down and she prayed, and she just prayed the fard because she didn't have enough time to pray the sunnahs, right? And it was kind of like a quick prayer too. It wasn't like the most amazing khushu or whatever. She lost track of time and she had to pray. Her family looked at her and they were like, what kind of prayer is that? Did that even count? Like, you didn't do sunnah, you didn't make dua, you didn't do tasbih, you didn't do sunnah after. They're like, it would have been better if you just didn't pray and just pray when you get home. Right? That's what they said. Who was right? She's right. She had to pray. It's obligatory upon her in that situation to pray it, right? But what are they saying? They're saying, if you can't do it perfect, just leave it. She's saying, no. In this circumstance, I couldn't do it perfect. I couldn't bring all the sunnahs. But I'm not going to leave it completely. I have to, especially my obligations, I got to do it. مَا لَا يُدْرَكُ كُلُّهُ لَا يُتْرَكُ كُلُّهُ. Whatever you can't do completely, don't leave it completely. So if you say, I can't do 1,000 salawats in one day, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. Okay, can you do 10? Yeah, we can do 10. Right? I can't read 20 pages of the Quran every day. Okay, can you read half a page? Can you read a line? Something. Don't deprive yourself of the blessings of these good deeds, right? So, good questions, mashallah. Other questions maybe from the sisters? Yes, in the back. The two before? No, I don't believe so. No, it's not. It's not obligatory. Sorry? It's an emphasized sunnah. Yeah. And the Prophet would not leave it. They never saw the Prophet ﷺ leave it, even when he traveled. So it is an emphasized sunnah, but it's not obligatory. So meaning if you miss it, you don't make it up. There's no need to make it up, and there really isn't a makeup, actually.
I actually heard like you can pray the fard and then make it up afterwards.
Maybe in another madhab. So anything that comes to actions, I'm Hanafi, and there are other madhabs.
I think Sheikh Al-Ulama told us that.
Okay, maybe.
So it's highly recommended to pray even if you.
In a Hanafi school, you can. In the Hanafi school, once you pray Fajr, you can't pray anything, right? You just pray Fajr, you have to just wait until Duha to pray, right? So this is why we study fiqh from madhabs, right? You have to study from a school, proper school of thought, because they're the ones that have understood. They've gone through the different hadith, all the evidences, and there are differences of ways that you can look at these things, different interpretations of the hadith. Imam Shafi'i differs from Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Ahmad. So we look to what the Imam have said, not to what our own interpretations say about the hadith. So, but good question, sister. It's a very important sunnah. The only salah after the 5 obligatory prayers that's more important than those 2 rak'ahs for Fajr. Anyone know what it is? There's only one other prayer. So there's the 5 daily prayers, that's the top prayers. Then you have something, then you have the 2 rak'ahs of before Fajr. What's in between this and the obligations? Witr. Witr, according to all of the Imams, except Abu Hanifa, they all say it's emphasized sunnah. Abu Hanifa says it's wajib, not fard. Abu Hanifa says there's a difference between obligation and requirement. So he says it's wajib, meaning Abu Hanifa says if you miss witr, you have to make it up. But it's not obligatory. Technicalities.
So we took the prayer before.
Witr is
Before Dhuhr, right?
no. It's after Isha. So usually you pray 4 rak'ahs of Isha, 2 rak'ahs of Sunnah. Those are emphasized Sunnahs. Then you pray Witr. In the Shafi'i school, it's 2 rak'ahs for Shafi'i, 1 rak'ah for Witr. In the Hanafi school, it's 1 prayer, 3 rak'ahs. So Witr is really important. So even Imam Umar Sulaiman had a video recently on this. He said after the 5 most important prayers, say you're building your salah, you work on the 5 obligatory prayers. What's the next prayer you add after that? Witr. What's after that? The 2 rak'ahs before Fajr. What's after that? The 2 rak'ahs after Maghrib. And then the 2 rak'ahs after Isha. Then the 4 rak'ahs before Dhuhr. And then the 2 rak'ahs after Dhuhr. And in some madhabs, they say 2 rak'ahs before Dhuhr instead of 4. Okay? But like these are the way that there's literally a map. You could start just, okay, this is my next habit. That could be your thing. Right? And if we're at, okay, I pray 2 prayers consistently, then your next prayer habit is, okay, what's the prayer that I'm going to start praying consistently in the next 20 days? Right? You could add 3 prayers that you pray consistently in the next 2 months, because it takes about 21 days to build a habit. Right? Okay, good question. Any other questions? Yes? Yeah, you don't have to. You don't have to. So say someone is just going gradually, they're building their salah, and they say, okay, I don't want to do too much all at once. Then yeah, they could just pray Isha and then pray Witr.
Yeah, for Shafi'is, it's 3 rak'ahs, right?
For Shafi'is, it's 1 prayer of 2 rak'ahs, and then another prayer of 1 rak'ah. Back to, they're separate. But there's a taslim in the middle. You probably see people pray like that in Taraweeh, right? The Taraweeh, they pray 2 and 1 or 3 altogether. Yes, on the right. Yeah. Yeah, good question. So the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is that he used to pray 8 rak'ahs of tahajjud. So 2, 2, 2, 2. 4 separate prayers of 2 rak'ahs each. And then he would pray witr at the end. But it's not required that you make it the last prayer. You could also pray it before you go to sleep, which is the recommendation of most of the scholars, because you don't know for sure if you're going to wake up for tahajjud. Maybe you oversleep or something. Considering that, Abu Hanifa says it's wajib, it's really important. So I always pray before I prayed it already before we started here. Like I always pray before I go to sleep. And then I could wake up in the middle of the night if I wanted to and pray up to 8 rak'ahs. And I wouldn't pray with it again. I've already prayed it. So what I would say, sister, like say someone said, I want to add witr to my habits, they should start praying it before they go to sleep, right? And then if they want to wake up for tahajjud, they would just start praying 2 and do that for a while. And then add another 2. Add another two, until you get to 8. But what's more important, tahajjud or the other sunnahs I mentioned? The other sunnahs I mentioned. But tahajjud has a special thing too, like it's special. So 2 rakats of tahajjud, especially now, wake up at 5:45 and pray 2 rakats of tahajjud is huge. Because what can you do in tahajjud that you can't, that's really special? That's a time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's mentioned in the hadith, that He yanzilu, that Allah descends, right, in a manner that's befitting. He's not descending like we descend, right? But to the lowest heaven, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls out, right, who's calling upon me so I may answer them, who's seeking forgiveness so I can forgive them, right? So it's like, Ya Allah, like ask Allah, Ya Allah, let me pray my sunnahs. It's like, let me pray witr, make me consistent witr. That's a secret. So to ask Allah during tahajjud. So I highly recommend for all of us that we strive to do 2 rakats of tahajjud on a nightly basis as a basic. Yeah.
Two brief questions. So witr, I think I have a misconception about witr.
Yeah.
I was told, like, if you pray witr, before, there shouldn't be a prayer after it before Fajr. Have you ever heard this, or is this just out of the?
It shouldn't be a prayer after.
Right.
Again, and I speak just from the Hanafi perspective, but to my understanding, the Hanafis are not alone in this. So you would have to ask someone who's aware of the Shafi'i school, for example, and ask them that question. But there's a famous thing, difference of approach between Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhu. So Abu Bakr used to pray witr before he went to sleep. This is what's transmitted. Because he, like I said, he said, I'm not sure that I'm going to wake up for tahajjud, even though he always woke up. It was like out of caution. You never know. Something happens, you get tired. Umar used to say, like, no, I'm going to wake up for tahajjud, I'm going to pray that. So he used to, like, exactly what the Prophet did, which is 8 rak'ahs and then 3. Right? So from that basis, like, it seems like it's, generally permitted. But you have to look at what the madhab say, because that's just one evidence. There could be other evidences. So you have to look at what the madhab say. Hanafis permit it. Hanafis, you can pray witr before you go to sleep, wake up, you can pray 8 rak'ahs and you're fine. But yeah.
There's one more question.
Oh yeah. No, good. Why are you sorry? Anyone's free to go. They don't have to stay if they don't want to stay, So anyone's here, they want to be here. Yeah.
Is tahajjud sunnah or?
Yeah, tahajjud is it's not an emphasized sunnah in the sense that it's not it's tricky. So you have 12 sunnahs are called ar-rawatib. Those are the ones I mentioned before. Those are emphasized sunnahs. The scholars disagree as to whether or not tahajjud is considered to be just mustahab, recommended, or is it emphasized sunnah. So they disagree on that. But what we do know is the Prophet always did it. Okay, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he would regularly do it, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the level of emphasis he put upon it was not as much as he put upon these other prayers. These other prayers were more emphasized by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, in the Shafi'i school, they do give a higher level of importance on tahajjud than in the other schools. So you have to look at what they say.
Isn't it also the first prayers that the Sahabis started praying first?
Yeah, the first prayers that the Muslims prayed were tahajjud. So it's not to say it's not important. It's just to say that the scholars are in agreement, generally speaking, that they are not as important as the other 12 rak'ahs I mentioned. Right? So if it was between doing this or doing that, you would do otherwise. Yeah. Yes. In the schools that say it's 20, yes. Which are it's the majority position is 20 rak'ahs, but you do have some in the Maliki school, they say 8 rak'ahs. But Taraweeh, the rak'ahs of Taraweeh are emphasized sunnahs. From a Hanafi perspective, and again, I'm Hanafi, say no. But from other madhabs, yeah, it's fine. Again, you want to build. So if it's 8, then that's fine to do 8. But 20 is, generally speaking, across the madhab, this is what's transmitted. Because again, what people do sometimes, it's interesting. So in the Maliki school, they affirm it. But what people do is they forget that Taraweeh was not established by the Prophet. Right, so Taraweeh, the Prophet began to pray some kind of prayer in Ramadan in the masjid. And then what happened is people started joining him. The first day was a few people, next day was a huge amount, word spread. And so the Prophet after that stopped. And he said, it's because I don't want you to think that it's wajib, that it's required upon you. Right? And actually, a lot of the companions later, they used to avoid certain things, certain types of practices that they might even have seen the Prophet do, but they wouldn't do it all the time because they didn't want people to think it's required. It's very interesting. So the Prophet didn't do it. Now, once the Prophet ﷺ passes away, Umar, right, establishes it, which is another proof that the Khulafa al-Rashidun, what they establish is Sunnah, in a sense. It's not established by the Prophet, but it's a what? It's the Sunnah of the Khulafa al-Rashidin, which has a status in the religion. And how did he pray it? He prayed at 20. He prayed 20 rakats. So it's not a big deal whether you do 8 or 20. And they do 36 in Medina. They used to do 36 in Medina because they used to say it's not fair that in Mecca they do 20 rakats, and after every 4 rakats, what do? Tawaf. So in Medina, they made the ijtihad that, okay, well, they're doing tawaf, we have to do more. So they did 36. Showing that there's some flexibility in this. It's not like a thing that you have to, But generally speaking, the number that the scholars mentioned across the madhab is 20. That's the majority position, and there's 8. There's 8 as well. But yeah, and it shouldn't be a matter of debate. So like, what's more rewarded from this perspective? Taraweeh or tahajjud? Taraweeh. But again, tahajjud has a special impact on the heart. And there's a certain level of sincerity in it. But Taraweeh on the surface is actually more emphasized. Yeah. Others? Okay. Oh. If anyone wants to go, guys, go. You're not gonna be in trouble or something. Yeah, let's find out. Shall I go ahead?
I think there's a sunnah for fasting on days of Thursday.
Mhm.
So, can we do that along with the sunnah of fasting on 13, 14, and
Yeah.
15?
Yeah. The recommendation is like to look at what you're doing now. So if someone's already doing 13, 14, 15, right? Then yeah, go ahead and add, for example, Mondays and Thursdays. But I would do it gradually, right? So if like we're not fasting any days right now, I wouldn't go into like fasting like a crazy amount in Rajab. I would like choose, a reasonable amount. So because you also have Sha'ban. Sha'ban is a month where the Prophet ﷺ fasted a lot in preparation for the month of Ramadan. We'll talk about that next month. Inshallah, we'll have another gathering on Sha'ban. But yeah, we need to make that determination. And my recommendation is, as we're taking these first steps, I think all of us should try to make these first steps very easily achievable, because sometimes we need the encouragement. Oh, I did it. It's, it feels good. And then you can add something else. So if someone just added the 3 white days, I think that's amazing. Yeah.
There's another sort of way of doing it, fasting of Dawood.
One day on, one day off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that better than this? Because I kind of feel that this makes me a lot more consistent.
One day on, one day off. So who was it that did this? It's Abdullah ibn Umar. I think it's Abdullah ibn Umar. One of the companions, he asked the Prophet ﷺ, I want to fast, what should I do? And he said, do the 3 days. And then he said, I can do more. He said, okay, do Mondays and Thursdays. And then he said, well, I can do more. And he says, can I fast consecutive days? The Prophet said, no, you can't. And he says, well, I can do more than what you gave me. He said, can I fast all days? He said, no, you can't fast all days. Because if you fast all days, like you didn't fast any days. So he said, the best fast you can do is the fast of Dawood, one day on, one day off. But the Prophet encouraged him. He said, don't do this. Why? Because if you do it, the Prophet was like, if you do it, you have to keep doing it. This is how the companions thought of it. They didn't think of a habit like, I'm going to start doing a habit and I'm going to stop. Everything they did, they would like bring it into their lives. That was in their life. So if they started fasting 3 days, they didn't stop. So think about it like this. Don't just think about the next 2 months. Think about what's something I can do this month, the next month, and then after Ramadan, consistently. It would be better for us to fast 3 days in each month, the rest of the year, in addition to Ramadan, than to what? Do 10 days on this and then not do anything after. So this is why he ended up taking the fast of Dawood because he was eager. And when he got into old age, he was still doing it. And he said, I wish I took the advice of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ when he told me to just do the 3 days and Mondays and Thursdays. So this goes back to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. In the deen yusr. Truly the religion is ease. وَلَنْ يُشَادَّ الدِّينَ أَحَدٌ إِلَّا غَلَبَهُ. And no one makes the religion tough on themselves except that it will overwhelm them. Right? فَسَدِّدُوا وَقَارِبُوا وَأَبْشِرُوا. So do your best and be moderate, right? And be of good cheer. Be of good cheer, meaning don't like let the deen become a source of like sadness and burden for you. Like, oh, I gotta fast another day. Like, why'd you do this to yourself? Allah didn't ask that from you, right? So better to what? Take it on in a way that is, this is what the Prophet's teaching us. فَسَدِّدُوا وَقَارِبُوا وَأَبْشِرُوا. Follow a middle path, go gradual and you'll achieve, so I wouldn't recommend it. I've never done it. I've never wanted to do it. You're better than me in that you want to do it, mashallah, and your heart's in the right place. But I would say start easy and build. We're all going to fast 30 days in Ramadan anyway, so you're going to get that, but we're thinking about how can we build something before and beyond Ramadan. All right, any last questions? Okay.
So,
Last one. Sisters, let me just say, any sisters have any questions? No. Last question. We'll make dua and then we'll head on, inshallah. Yeah.
3 white days.
Mm-hmm.
But, so like you're saying, you get a specific reward for fasting all 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get a reward for fasting only one of the 3 or anything like this?
You get rewarded for that day.
For that one day,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't be the reward of fasting the whole month.
No, so each day that you fast is like fasting 10 days.
Oh,
Yeah. And then if you fast all 3, it's like fasting 30 days, like fasting the whole month. Yeah. Well, yeah, inshallah. So it's good. I mean, if you can only do one of the 13, 14, 15, that's great. Do it. And no problem. Now, one day that you're not supposed to fast, you can't specify it to fast it as if there's something special about it is Jummah. You can't just say, I'm going to fast Jummah because Jummah is special. No. Actually, the Prophet ﷺ did not allow that. He said, if you're going to fast Jummah, you have to either fast Thursday or Saturday, right? You can't just do it on its own. Unless there's some day that lands on it that is good to fast on in and of itself, which is like Yom Arafah, the day of Arafah. Yeah. Okay. So let's make a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't think that tonight is the first night of Rajab, but it's possible that it is. And so we'll make dua to Allah. And inshallah, tomorrow night, we should all make dua, inshallah ta'ala, as well. So, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافي مزيدا يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك ولعظيم سلطانك سبحانك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك فلك الحمد حتى ترضى ولك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد بعد الرضا اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وفي الآخرين وفي الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين. Ya Allah, we've gathered here to come closer to you, to thank you for your blessings, for the life that you've given us, and for these special days that you're bringing us into. We have gathered here, Ya Allah, to receive your forgiveness and to receive your mercy. So grant us your forgiveness and grant us your mercy. Allow no one of this gathering to leave except that you've forgiven them their sins and that you fulfilled their needs and you've bestowed your mercy upon them and that you are pleased with them, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Ya Allah, we ask you to give us immense blessings and guidance in the days of Rajab and to give us immense guidance and blessings in the days of Sha'ban and to make us reach the month of Ramadan and to benefit from the barakat, the blessings of Ramadan, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Ya Allah, as we move towards you, Ya Allah, allow us to move towards you gradually, Ya Allah. Give us strength and give us resolve and give us the love that pushes us along the path towards you, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Make things easy for us and do not make them difficult, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. And encourage us when we falter in our resolve, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Ya Allah, give us companions that help us do good and that encourage us towards the right path and encourage us towards patience and encourage us towards guidance, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Ya Allah, we ask you, Ya Allah, that any sin that we are finding difficulty leaving, Ya Allah, that in this month you grant us victory over that sin. and that is no longer in our lives, Ya Allah, and that is no longer in our hearts, Ya Allah, that is no longer in our minds, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. Remove it completely, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. Remove all the sins from our lives, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. We need your help. And Ya Allah, we want to build good habits and we want to remove the bad habits, but we know we can't do it without you, Ya Allah. We are helpless, and you are the one who fulfills the needs of the helpless. So fulfill our needs. Ya Allah, make us righteous, Ya Allah, and remove corruption from our beings, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. Ya Allah, bless us and our families and forgive us for all of our sins and inspire us towards that which pleases you in these months. Ya Rahman Rahimeen. Ya Allah, grant victory to the people of Gaza, Ya Allah, in this month. Ya Allah, and grant victory to the people of Sudan in this month, Ya Allah. Grant victory to the people of East Turkestan in this month, Ya Allah. Grant victory to the people in Kashmir in this month, Ya Allah. Grant victory to the people, Ya Allah, all over the Muslim Ummah, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. Ya Allah, and give tamkeen, give stability and goodness, Ya Allah, to the people of Syria and the people of Bangladesh, and allow all of the Muslim lands to be filled with justice and peace and the radiant Sharia that you have granted us through the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Ya Allah, connect us to the hearts of the Ummah, connect us to our messengers, Ya Allah, and to that which they taught us, Ya Allah, and connect us ultimately to you, Ya Rahman Rahimeen, the bestower of blessings, Ya Allah, the source of all mercy. Ya Allah, anyone here, Ya Allah, that has any need, fulfill it, Ya Allah. And we ask you for every good, that which is near and that which is far, that which we know of and that which we don't. And we seek protection in you, Ya Allah, from every evil, that which is near and that which is far, that which we are aware of and that which we are not, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Inshallah, next month, in about a month's time, we will gather again to discuss the month of Sha'ban and how to prepare for the month of Sha'ban. So have a blessed Rajab, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make all of us better in a month's time so that we can work towards the month of Sha'ban and the month of Ramadan. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.